Do air purifiers actually work? Welcome back to
Allergy Actually.
Today we're going to dive into in-home air purifiers. And we're not talking about the ones that go in your furnace, which is kind of a whole separate ball game. But we're talking about the portable ones that sit on the floor in your living room, your bedroom. They're all different types. But who wants to start diving into what type of patient do we recommend an air purifier for? Is it everybody or just certain allergies?
So I think there definitely, is some benefit in general. When we look at data from the EPA, our indoor air quality is known to generally actually be lower or worse than outdoor air quality. And so I think, for folks that have sensitive airways who are prone to allergies, in my case, I have an autoimmune condition called Sjogren's that can affect my airways and my lungs. It's reasonable to consider healthy and clean air, being really important, just like filtered water and, the things we put on our skin, the food we eat. That being said, there's better data to support its usefulness in certain instances.
Sure.
So, for instance, if I have a patient who is allergic to dust mite only, which is, in the U.S. at least, it's fairly rare that we have what we call monosensitized patients, meaning just allergic to one allergen. And we usually have patients who are multisensitized to multiple different things. But for instance, looking for an air filter for that is probably not going to be all that helpful because dust mite is very heavy. And I always tell my patients your main exposure is going to be in your bed and in soft places and things like that. But when it comes to having pets and pollen, mold spores, things like that do float around in the air, it is definitely worth it to think about getting an air filter. I always tell my patients whenever you open your bedroom door, the things that are going to be in the air, pollen, mold, animal dander, dust mite is in the room, but it's not floating around.
Yep. That's what I recommend for my patients too. But I think to your point, Kara, there are probably other reasons people might want to have an air purifier. But if your only concern is treating your allergies, you want to be treating the things that are in the air. Here's a question I get from my patients. How big of an air purifier should I get? So I usually say most manufacturers will put on the packaging the square footage that it covers. So you want to look at that and you want to know how big of a space you're trying to clean. So for most patients with allergies, start with your bedroom. You want to make sure that your sleeping environment, where you probably spend the most time proportionally of your whole day, is in your bedroom. Start there. And so check out the square footage of your bedroom, look at the air purifier labeling, and that'll help you know if you need small, medium, large, or whatever size. The next step would probably be the main living space, which is usually bigger. So you're going to need a bigger air purifier for that space.
And then I would say third on my list, and this is because I now primarily have been working from home, is my home office, because I am spending probably just as much time there as I am in my bedroom, at least for the time being.
And so work, whether it be at home or at a physical place elsewhere, you're right, is another place to think about getting one.
Yeah. And like in our medical office, we have air purifiers in each room. And that actually started after COVID. It wasn't something we did before that. But then I came to think, for an allergist office, it's probably not a bad idea because, for instance, for pets, those allergens, for cat especially, are very sticky. And we carry it on our clothes. And so I think, do we all have a cat?
I do not.
Okay, I do.
Well, we both have cats. And so I always think, oh my gosh, I'm exposing my poor patients to all of the things at my house. And having those air purifiers in there help whenever I, walk out, and then you have some time in between patients.
That's really smart. I always kind of had this. Often when I was in the office, we would occasionally have patients with service dogs. And I, absolutely want to support anyone who has a service dog, right? And also, I'm taking care of folks are allergic to the service animals. And so there's this competing,
it's hard.
do no harm, right? And so I think that's really smart. And we had a large unit in our shot waiting area kind of for that reason. But yeah, that's I really like that. I think it's probably good for us to at least mention that we do have an air purifier as a sponsor for the podcast. In part, we kind of discussed this a lot about, one, wanting to be transparent about any of those financial relationships, but also really only partnering with companies that
we believe in and use.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I think we'll all probably say
Molekule.
And part of that is, well, I know we've talked a little bit. Frankly, I love the aesthetic.
Yeah. And again, that's one of the things.
Little leather handle.
One of the things we talk about. It is lovely and it's unobtrusive, and
we don't have it plugged in right now, but it is quiet.
It's really light too.
Yes.
I'm just gonna put it over here.
I brought it to an event at the kids' daycare the other day to kind of show and tell, and my daughter was able to carry it in for me.
This is the small one too.
Yes,
there's a
this
bigger
is what
one.
I have in my office at home.
And we have the bigger one in our office. I guess just to talk a little bit about the technology and why it's now my preferred air purifier, even before they were a sponsor, is because HEPA technology has been around for 40 plus years.
So the high efficiency particulate air, HEPA, right?
Thank you. Yep. That has been around for a long time. The technology hasn't really changed much, but I think most people see that as the top form of air filtration. Molekule has combined HEPA with PECO, P-E-C-O, particulate, I don't know,
we would have to
breakdown of those words. But what PECO is PECO destroys other particles in the air. So it's combining two different technologies to get even more advanced, more medical grade air filtration in your home.
The other benefit that I saw too is the app is really easy to use. It's easy to set up. It reminds you can actually subscribe so that you get the replacement filters. I think that's one of the other big issues with an air purifier is it's the filter that actually is what makes it effective and does the work. And so if you're not willing or able to replace the filter, then kind of we were talking in the last episode about immunotherapy. If you aren't going to commit, don't bother, because it really, it's just going to, increase your power bill a tiny bit. So that's really nice, but it also monitors your air quality. So one thing that I used, actually the larger unit to the old office to test out before we moved to our current home, we had a gas stove. And so I plugged it into the kitchen, which was a larger space. It was an appropriate, size space for that unit. But I was able to see how much that air quality changed and worsened when I used the gas stove to cook dinner. And you could hear it automatically turn on high mode because the particulate was so high.
Oh my gosh.
And so that for me, this was all around the same time that a lot of the information was coming out about the worries about natural gas and things. And if you're able, or had the option to consider electric or induction, and we were in the process of building a house. And so decided okay, I'm just going to figure out how to use induction because really, I'm seeing this data, right? In real time, hearing it kick into high gear, especially as someone with a more sensitive airway.
Yeah. I need a new stove. So now that's where my mind is.
Next episode, allergy living stoves.
Yeah, absolutely. But, in summation, it is a good idea to consider an air filter if you have seasonal allergies to different pollens, to mold, if you have pets. And one big thing I think about the three of us likely is because we're such champions of immunotherapy and working with your environment to make everything comfortable for you while you live with your allergies. We don't tell people to get rid of our pets. That's not, that's never an option.
No. That's old school allergists,
right, exactly.
Paternalists.
Yes, you have to get rid. They did that study at Cleveland Clinic about 10 years ago that showed that people would rather get rid of their allergists than their pet. And I totally get that. And so I think about that a lot. So the point is that if you have any of those scenarios sort of happening in your life, considering a high quality air purifier is a really good option to help with environmental control.
And it is an investment. I think that is something to consider. And, anytime we're thinking through what we're recommending, talking with your doc one-on-one to say, here's my budget and what's the most bang for my buck. And so again, if you're just dust mite allergic, this is probably not it.
Nope.
Depending on your symptoms, your goals, your values, and what, if you're someone who's like, I don't care if I have to take an extra Zyrtec that's going to cost me 5 cents, that's fine. That's great as long as you're tolerating it okay. But if you are someone who's like, gosh, I really want to cut down on how much medication I'm using, then we do have to think about air purifiers. We do have to think about immunotherapy and some of these other options that are going to allow for that.
So thank you for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, we would love to interact with you. Just list them below, and we'd be happy to answer questions or do another episode on this area if you want us to go and dig into anything deeper. And we will see you next time on
Allergy Actually.